Marianne Reed's black dress still smelled faintly of hospital antiseptic, the kind you never wash out after months in oncology waiting rooms. She stood at the front pew of Riverside Church, Manhattan, fingers locked around her father's worn rosary, wedding ring cold against the beads. The organ held one long note, like the building itself was trying not to break. Then the doors opened. Grant Holloway strode in as if he owned the aisle, hair perfectly set, suit pressed, that easy smile he used on donors and bankers. On his arm was a woman in a cream coat that didn't belong at a funeral. The coat hung open. A rounded belly announced the truth before anyone spoke. The whispers hit first. Marianne felt them move through the pews like a draft. Grant stopped beside the casket, leaned down, and kissed the woman's temple. "Everyone," he said, voice warm enough to fool strangers, "I want you to meet Sloane. She's carrying my baby."
"It's time we stop pretending."
Marianne's breath vanished. Across the aisle, her son Noah went rigid, his jaw clenched so hard a tendon jumped near his ear. Sloane's eyes found Marianne's, not apology, assessment, like she was pricing a house. Grant turned to Marianne, lowering his voice just enough to sound merciful. "Don't make a scene," he murmured. "Your father would hate that." The cruelty was surgical. Her father's framed photo on the easel, Dr. Thomas Reed, smiling in scrubs, seemed to watch, as if asking why the room had become a courtroom. Marianne's iPhone buzzed in her clutch. Unknown number. One text. "I'm sorry." He paid her. Grant raised his hand toward the microphone set for the eulogy. "I'll say a few words," he announced, already reaching. Marianne's knees threatened to buckle. She tasted metal, the way she had the day the doctor said stage 4. She forced herself to look up, to meet the stares, to keep her son from seeing her crumble. Near the side entrance, a security guard adjusted a small black dome camera above the doors. A red light blinked once, steady, recording. The funeral director stepped close and whispered, "Ma'am, that camera caught everything." Marianne Reed was 47, and for the last 6 months she had learned the weight of quiet duty. At Lenox Hill Hospital, she worked as a patient liaison, the person families clung to when doctors spoke in careful phrases. She knew how to explain a treatment plan without taking away hope. She knew how to hand someone a tissue without making them feel small. That skill didn't save her at home. Every morning before her shift, Marianne stopped by her mother's assisted living facility on the Upper West Side. She brought small comforts, fresh socks, a labeled pill organizer, a framed photo of Noah at 8 years old with frosting on his chin. Some days her mother recognized her instantly. Other days, her eyes drifted past Marianne like fog, and Marianne would smile anyway, because fear had no right to become her mother's last language. She kept her own life simple on purpose. A black coffee from Starbucks, sipped cold in the car because she never had time to sit. A Walmart bag of groceries she carried up the stairs alone. A worn notebook where she tracked bills down to the dollar because Grant insisted they were tight, even while he wore a new watch and laughed about networking dinners. Marianne didn't ask questions anymore. Not since the last time she did, and Grant tilted his head like she was an inconvenience. "You're emotional," he'd said. "You always are when you're tired. Don't embarrass yourself." So she swallowed it. She focused on Noah, 16, gentle, too perceptive. She made sure he had a clean uniform, his lunch packed, his college dreams protected from adult chaos. She never spoke badly about his father in front of him. She just kept the peace, the way women in her family had been taught to do. Then her father got sick, and Grant became colder, not kinder. He missed appointments. He sent money later. He complained about the parking fees at the hospital as if her father's pain was an inconvenience. The morning of the funeral, Marianne stood in her bathroom, pinning her hair back,
staring at the faint bruise beneath her eye from lack of sleep. She opened the drawer for lipstick and found something else instead. A spare phone she'd never seen before, face down, fully charged. Her hands went numb as she turned it over, and the screen lit up with one calendar alert. Sloan, funeral debut. Don't let Marianne talk. By the time Marianne and Noah got back to their apartment, the city had turned that dull winter gray that makes Manhattan feel like it's holding its breath. Noah went straight to his room without a word. Marianne didn't stop him. She knew that kind of silence, when a kid is working hard not to break. In the kitchen, she set her black clutch on the counter and pulled out her iPhone. One habit from the hospital: verify, document, don't panic. She opened the banking app, expecting to see the same thin balance Grant always claimed they had. Instead, a red banner flashed, "Account access restricted." Her stomach dropped. She tried the joint credit card, declined. She tried the backup card she kept for emergencies, declined again. A third alert popped up, this one from her credit monitoring service, the one she'd signed up for after Grant told her she was paranoid. New inquiry. Auto loan. Credit score down 112 points. Marianne leaned against the counter as if the floor had shifted. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was math. Assisted living for her mother was due in 5 days. Noah's school had emailed about a spring trip deposit he'd been excited for, and the hospital had already sent the first round of bills from her father's final month. Numbers so high, they looked like a typo until you remembered chemotherapy doesn't care about anyone's budget. She couldn't just leave. Grant had made sure of that piece by piece. He'd started handling the finances 2 years ago when he said her job was too emotional and she needed to focus on family. He had her direct deposit her paycheck into the joint account, then moved his own money somewhere she couldn't see. He'd slid papers across the table late at night, refinance forms, routine updates, harmless signatures. She'd trusted him because trust was what marriage was supposed to be. Now she saw the design. If she walked out, she'd be the woman who abandoned the home, the woman with no credit, no cash, and a mother who might lose her room. Grant could hire lawyers. He could buy narratives. He could say she was unstable, grieving, unfit. Marianne opened the spare phone she'd found. No passcode. A calendar, a message thread, and a scanned document labeled Guarantor, M. Reed. Her hands shook as she reached for her father's old Bible from the hall table, the one she'd carried to the church without thinking. Something hard slid from the pages and clicked onto the floor. A small brass key lay in her palm, taped to a note. Read trust, only when he shows his true face. Riverside Church sat above the Hudson like a stone ship, its stained glass bleeding blue and amber onto the polished aisle. Outside, the February wind cut between black coats and the Manhattan skyline looked sharp enough to slice. Inside, warmth didn't reach the front pew. It never did on days like this. The Reed family name carried weight here. Dr. Thomas Reed had funded a cancer support program through the parish for years, quietly, without press. That meant the mourners weren't only relatives. Board members came, donors came. Men in dark overcoats who normally shook hands in hotel ballrooms filed past the guest book with careful faces.
At the side table, the funeral director checked arrivals on an iPad, tapping names, matching them to floral deliveries and seating cards. A young staffer adjusted the microphone stand at the lectern, testing it once. A soft pop that made Marianne's shoulders tighten.
The sound traveled through the nave like a warning. Grant loved stages. Marianne saw it now the way you notice a crack in a wall once you know it's there. He moved through the line of condolences with a practiced hand on Sloane's back, letting people look, letting the gossip spread, then acting wounded by it. Every time Noah's eyes lifted, Grant smiled as if nothing had changed. Near the main doors, 2 black dome cameras blinked red, one aimed at the entrance, another angled toward the center aisle. A third, smaller camera watched the side corridor by the offices. Marianne hadn't noticed it before. Now she couldn't stop noticing anything. Her fingers curled around the brass key in her coat pocket until the edges bit her skin. "Only when he shows his true face," her father's note had said. Grant had done that in public, in front of a casket. But Marianne still didn't know what the key opened, or whether it would save her or bury her. A hush rolled through the church as Grant stepped toward the lectern. He touched the microphone, smiled at the crowd, and cleared his throat like a man about to deliver grace. From the back pew, a silver-haired woman rose, a slim briefcase in her hand, and walked straight down the aisle. "Mr. Halloway," Judith Pruitt said evenly, "the Reed estate has instructions you can't interrupt." Grant Halloway had mastered the art of looking righteous while doing something rotten. He stood at the lectern with the same posture he used in boardrooms, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, voice ready to land like a promise. He wasn't crying. He didn't have to. In Grant's world, tears were for people with nothing to negotiate. Marianne had watched him rehearse this version of himself for years. The devoted husband in public, the provider at charity dinners, the man who shook hands, told clean jokes, and remembered everyone's children's names, then came home and treated his own family like an expense report. Control was his love language. He controlled money first, because money made the rules. 2 years ago, he'd convinced Marianne to route her paycheck into the joint account for simplicity. Then, quietly, he moved the savings into an account she couldn't see. He started handing her a credit card the way a father hands a teenager car keys, conditional, revocable, always watched. When she questioned a charge, he smiled like she'd misunderstood basic math. "You're tired," he'd say. "You're emotional. Let me handle it." And when her father got sick, Grant's mask sharpened. He complained about hospital parking. He arrived late to chemo appointments with coffee in his hand and impatience in his eyes. He called Marianne's grief drama, then used it as proof she couldn't be trusted with decisions. He built a file of little moments, raised voices, missed sleep, panic attacks, anything he could twist into instability if he ever needed to. Today at the funeral, his motive wasn't love or honesty. It was leverage. Dr. Reed's friends were in these pews, donors, attorneys, a banker Grant had been chasing for months. Grant needed a fresh narrative before anyone asked questions about why his wife suddenly looked trapped. So he brought Sloane like a trophy, pregnant, smiling, obedient, and dared the room to accept her. A glint flashed on his wrist when he lifted his hand, polished metal under stained glass. Then his fingers tightened around the microphone. He leaned in, voice turning soft, almost tender. "Thomas Reed was a great man," Grant began, eyes sweeping the crowd. "And I want to honor him by being honest about the future." Judith Pruitt didn't flinch. She stepped closer, briefcase still in hand, and her calm cut through his performance like a clean blade. "Grant,
she said.
Before you rewrite this family in public, you will listen to what Dr. Reed legally left behind. Sloane Mercer didn't look like someone who had wandered into the wrong funeral. She looked staged, hair glossy, makeup soft, her cream coat belted high under her belly like it was part of the announcement. When Judith Pruitt spoke, Sloane's mouth tightened, but her hand stayed linked through Grant's arm as if the church belonged to them. Grant leaned toward her, whispering, and Sloane nodded with a small smile. Then she stepped forward, heels clicking once on the stone. Marianne noticed the thin gold Cartier bracelet at Sloane's wrist, catching the stained glass light the way a lure catches fish. "I'm sorry for your loss," Sloane said to the room, voice sweet enough to pass for kindness. Her eyes never left Marianne. "Thomas Reed would want the family to move on, with truth." Marianne felt Noah shift beside her, protective and confused. She placed her palm on his sleeve, a silent instruction. Stay quiet, stay safe. Sloane turned to Judith. "With respect, ma'am, we don't need lawyers today. This is a funeral. Grant is trying to do the right thing." Judith didn't raise her voice. "The right thing would have been done before you used a casket as a stage." A ripple moved through the pews. Someone coughed. Someone's phone chimed and was quickly silenced. Marianne's cheeks burned. She could feel her father's friends studying her. Men who'd once called her Doc's girl, now watching to see if she'd explode. Behind the casket, lilies trembled in the draft from the open doors, and she hated that even flowers seemed to flinch. The dome camera above the doors blinked red, steady, indifferent. Sloane's smile sharpened. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded ultrasound photo, holding it up like evidence. "This isn't gossip," she said. "This is a child." "Grant promised me we would be a real family by spring." Grant swallowed, then recovered, spreading his hands as if he were the victim of poor timing. "Marianne, don't punish the baby for adult problems." Noah's voice came out small, unplanned. "Dad, you said she was just helping with events." Grant's eyes flashed, warning. Marianne saw it. The same look he used at home right before he cut off money, right before he made her doubt her own memory. Judith opened her briefcase. "Mr. Halloway, doctor." Reed left specific instructions for this moment. Sloane glanced at Grant and whispered, "Do it now." And he slid an envelope toward the funeral director. The funeral director glanced at the envelope Grant slid across like it was just another form. His eyes flicked to Judith's briefcase, then to the line of mourners waiting to file past the casket. For a beat, his face tightened, professional conflict. Then he nodded once and stepped to the lectern. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice practiced and smooth, "we'll proceed with remarks from the family." Judith Pruitt's gaze sharpened. "Excuse me," she began, but the director lifted a hand, not unkindly, the way people hush a disturbance they don't want to name. Grant took that as permission. He moved forward, palm settling at the small of Sloane's back like he was escorting a bride, not a mistress. He helped her into the front pew, Marianne's father's seat, then turned, slow, so the whole church could see. Marianne's throat tightened as if someone had wrapped a ribbon around it and pulled. She could feel every eye, the donors, the relatives, the church ladies who had brought casseroles when her father got sick, watching her to see whether she would explode. Grant leaned into the microphone and softened his face into something mournful. "Thomas Reed was a man of dignity," he said. "He believed family should be protected, even when emotions run high." It was a trap. Marianne recognized the tone he used at home when he wanted her to doubt herself. He looked directly at her, smile barely there.
Marianne has been overwhelmed these past months, he continued, pausing for the right amount of sympathy. So if she says anything confusing today, please understand it comes from grief. The words hit harder than a shout. Confusing. Grief. Code for unstable. A murmur rolled through the pews. Someone whispered, "Poor thing." And Marianne didn't know if they meant her father or her. Noah stiffened beside her, anger flashing across his young face. Marianne pressed her fingers into his sleeve again. Steady, steady, because she would not let her son be pulled into an adult war inside his grandfather's funeral. Judith stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Mr. Halloway is not authorized to—" The funeral director cut her off with a tight smile. "Ma'am, we can address paperwork after the service." Grant's eyes gleamed with victory. He continued speaking, painting himself as the patient husband and Marianne as the storm. Behind him, Sloane rested a hand on her belly and watched Marianne like she was waiting for a breakdown on cue. Marianne lowered her gaze to her clutch, her iPhone screen glowing with another bank alert. Payment failed. Then she heard it. 2 steps behind her, in the side corridor, Grant's voice, low and urgent. "After this," he murmured to someone, "we file for emergency guardianship. She won't be able to stop it." Marianne turned and saw the funeral director pocket the envelope while nodding. "Yes, Mr. Holloway. She'll be escorted out if she speaks." The moment Grant finished speaking, the church didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a room waiting for a verdict. People rose in slow waves, filing toward the casket. Marianne stayed seated, because if she stood too fast, her legs might give out. Noah hovered close, shoulders squared like he could block the world with a teenager's body. A woman Marianne recognized from church fundraisers, Elaine Fitch, mid-50s, always the first to volunteer, stepped into the aisle with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She held a small velvet pouch in one hand, the kind the church used for donations. "Marianne?" Elaine said softly, but the softness was for the audience, not for her. "Could you come with me a moment? There's an issue." Judith Pruitt lifted her chin. "What kind of issue?" Elaine glanced toward the side corridor where the funeral director had disappeared. "The condolence contributions," she said, voice turning careful. "A cash envelope meant for the Reed family's memorial fund is missing, and someone reported seeing Mrs. Reed near the table." A sudden hush gathered like storm clouds, heads tilted, eyes narrowed. Marianne felt her face burn as if she'd been slapped. Grant didn't look surprised. He looked relieved, the way a man looks when his backup plan arrives on time. "That's exactly what I meant," he said, stepping forward with his palms open. "She's under so much stress. She doesn't even realize what she's doing." Marianne's mouth went dry. "I didn't take anything." Elaine's expression sharpened, almost offended by the denial. "Then it should be easy to clear up. We just need to ask a few questions in the office." Noah's voice cracked, small but steady. "My mom didn't do that." "Sweetheart," Grant said quickly, turning to Noah with a warning smile, "this isn't for you." Judith moved between them like a wall. "No one is interrogating Mrs. Reed in a hallway during her father's funeral," she said. "If there's an accusation, we handle it properly, with documentation." Elaine hesitated. "We have the check-in log." "The check-in log proves who walked through the doors," Judith replied, "not who stole an envelope." On the side table, the staffer's MacBook Air sat open with the guest list and timestamps. Marianne saw the cursor blinking, indifferent to the way her life was being rewritten. From the back, the security guard who had adjusted the camera earlier cleared his throat. "Ma'am?" he said to Elaine.
"We've got cameras on that table." Grant's eyes flashed, just once, then he forced a chuckle. "Of course. Let's not make this bigger than it is." But Marianne suddenly understood. This was never about an envelope. It was about making her look guilty, unstable, unfit, so Grant could take everything while she was still grieving. Judith snapped her briefcase open and said, "Then we pull the footage, right now, before anyone has time to remember wrong." The security guard led them toward a narrow hallway beside the parish offices, where the light turned fluorescent and unforgiving. It didn't feel like a place for grief. It felt like a place where people got managed. Marianne could still hear the organ fading behind the heavy doors, like the church was trying to pretend nothing ugly was happening in its ribs. Elaine Fitch walked ahead with the velvet pouch clutched close. The funeral director followed, face tight, avoiding Marianne's eyes. Grant stayed on Marianne's left, close enough that his cologne mixed with the cold smell of stone. His Rolex flashed once as he checked the time, impatient, like even shame had a schedule. Noah tried to follow, but the director stepped in front of him. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "why don't you wait with the family? This is adult business." Noah looked at his mother, helpless. Marianne forced a small nod, the kind nurses give frightened kids in the ER. "Stay safe. Stay out of the crossfire." Judith Pruitt didn't move. "He stays within eyesight," she said. "No one isolates a minor." Grant spread his hands. "Judith, you're turning this into a circus. I'm trying to protect Marianne. She's not thinking clearly." Marianne's spine went cold. There it was again, his favorite weapon. Not angry, not cruel, concerned. The kind that makes other people doubt you before you open your mouth. They reached a small office with a security monitor on the desk. The screen showed the entrance, the donation table, the center aisle. But the footage was paused, frozen on a frame of mourners in black. The guard tapped keys, frowning. "The system's password protected," he said. "We usually need admin approval." Grant leaned in, voice low. "Then don't waste time. The service is still going. People are upset." The guard glanced at the funeral director waiting. The director exhaled. "We can't release video without the church administrator," he said, "and she won't be back until Monday unless there's a police request." Grant's mouth twitched, victory hidden under concern. He pulled a folder from inside his coat, the same smooth motion he used when sliding contracts across dinner tables. "Marianne," he said gently, setting it in front of her, "sign this and we stop the gossip." "Temporary guardianship for Noah, just until you stabilize. It's routine. It protects him." Marianne stared at the papers. Her name was already typed. Her hands shook. If she refused, he'd paint her as unstable. If she signed, he'd own her son. Judith stepped forward, voice like steel. "She will not sign anything in a church office while she's being accused." Grant's eyes hardened. "Then I make one call," he murmured, "and you'll be escorted out. Your mother's facility, your credit, your job, Marianne. You don't have the power to fight me." Marianne's fingers curled around the brass key in her pocket until it hurt. The security guard suddenly said, "Ma'am, our cameras override in 12 hours. And Judith snapped, "Then we move right now." The sanctuary doors swung open again, and the cold February air rushed in like a witness that refused to stay outside. Grant walked back in first, composed, as if the side office confrontation had been a minor inconvenience. Marianne followed a step behind, her pulse loud in her ears, the brass key digging into her palm inside her coat pocket. People turned, not all of them, but enough. The kind of turning that says, something happened,
something shameful. Grant didn't wait for permission. He went straight to the lectern, one hand already on the microphone. The stained glass painted his face in soft colors, like the church itself was trying to make him look decent. "My apologies," he said, voice smooth, projecting concern. "There's been a misunderstanding regarding the memorial donations. Emotions are high, and Marianne—" He paused, letting the silence do the work. "Marianne isn't thinking clearly." Marianne's vision narrowed. She could see her father's casket beneath the floral spray, the photo of him smiling in scrubs, the neat line of friends who had trusted him with their lives. Grant was using that trust like a weapon. Elaine Fitch stepped forward with the velvet pouch, eyes downcast, acting reluctant. "We're just missing one envelope," she said, loud enough for the front pews. "We need to document it." A ripple of whispers ran through the room, small, cruel, fast. Marianne felt Noah stiffen beside her, the boy's face draining as he realized what his father was doing. Grant turned toward Noah with practiced tenderness. "Son, I'm going to make sure you're protected," he said, then looked back at the crowd. "Given Marianne's current state, I've consulted counsel about temporary guardianship, just until she stabilizes." Guardianship. In a church. At her father's funeral. Marianne tried to speak, but the funeral director moved closer, blocking her path like a polite wall. "Ma'am," he murmured, "please, let's keep this respectful." Respectful. While her husband buried her alive in front of her father. Noah's voice cracked. "Dad, stop!" Grant's eyes flashed a warning, then softened again for the audience. "I'm sorry you have to see this," he told the room, as if Marianne were the problem on display. Judith Pruitt stepped into the aisle, briefcase in hand. "This is defamatory," she said, clear and calm, "and it will have consequences." Grant smiled without warmth. "Only if she can prove it." From the back pew, a tall man in a dark coat rose slowly, his expression unreadable. He didn't look at Grant first. He looked at Marianne, steady, respectful, like he recognized her father's spine in her. "Grant Holloway," the man said, voice carrying through the nave. "Dr. Reed left instructions with me, and they begin with the footage." The church didn't erupt. It chilled. That was the worst part, the way the crowd turned quiet, polite, and cautious, as if betrayal was a stain that could transfer through the air. A few of Dr. Reed's old colleagues lowered their eyes. A donor couple Marianne recognized from hospital galas shifted a step back, not from Grant, but from her, like she was the risk. Grant used the silence like oxygen. He softened his face into a patient, wounded husband and spread his hands toward the pews. "I'm grateful we have responsible people here," he said, voice measured. "We all want what's best for Noah. We all want Marianne safe." Safe, as if she were a hazard. Marianne's cheeks burned so hot she could barely feel the cold stone beneath her shoes. She stared at her father's casket and felt the sting of humiliation twist into something deeper, grief turning sour, like milk left out too long. She had spent months translating medical language into human language for strangers. Now she couldn't find the words for her own life. Noah leaned toward her, whispering, "Mom, he's lying." His voice trembled with rage he didn't know where to put. Elaine Fitch clutched the velvet pouch tighter, chin lifted, playing the role of reluctant witness. The funeral director kept hovering near Marianne's shoulder like a polite guardrail, ready to block her if she raised her voice. A woman in the third row murmured, "Poor Dr. Reed," and Marianne couldn't tell if it was pity or judgment. Judith Pruitt's tone stayed even. "There will be no guardianship discussion in this sanctuary," she said, "and no accusations without proof." Grant's smile sharpened. "Proof is exactly what your friend just brought up," he said, nodding toward the tall man in the dark coat. "Great. Let's see it." The tall man didn't look at Grant.
He looked at Marianne first, steady, respectful. "Daniel Ashford," he said quietly, like introductions still mattered here. "I run the parish's community fund. Your father asked me to be present today." Marianne's iPhone buzzed again. She glanced down and felt her stomach drop. A building email alert. Access updated. Her key fob deactivated. Grant had already started locking doors. Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive, placing it in Judith's palm. "The security guard copied the entrance feed before we came back in," he said. "It's time-stamped." Judith's eyes flicked to the screen of her phone as she plugged it in. On the first frame, Grant was clearly seen handing Elaine the exact envelope, 10 minutes before the service began. Marianne slipped through the side door into the small prayer room behind the sanctuary, the one with 2 folding chairs, a box of tissues, and a single candle that never fully melted. The sounds of the funeral faded to a muffled murmur, like the church was holding its breath for her to fail. Her hands finally started shaking, not from fear anymore, from the delayed shock of being accused beside her father's casket. She pressed her forehead to the cool plaster wall and let one sob escape, ugly and quiet. In the hospital, she had learned how to cry without making noise. She hated that skill. The room smelled of candle wax and old hymnals, and for a second she was 8 again, holding her father's hand after Sunday service. Noah hovered at the doorway. "Mom?" he whispered. "I'm okay," she lied, forcing a nod. "Go sit with Daniel for a minute. Stay where I can see you." Noah hesitated, then obeyed, because he could feel the danger even if he didn't understand the rules. When the door clicked shut, Marianne sank onto the chair. She stared at her wedding ring until the gold blurred. Grant's voice replayed in her head, safe, unstable, guardianship. Words designed to erase her. She thought of her mother's confused eyes, the unpaid bill, the deactivated key fob. He was stripping her life down to nothing and calling it protection. And he expected the crowd to thank him. She opened her clutch and pulled out the brass key and her father's note, edges softened by the Bible pages. For a moment she imagined him sitting beside her, steady hands, steady faith. Her throat tightened. "I'm done begging," she said aloud, the sentence landing like a vow. She wiped her face, squared her shoulders, and checked her iPhone. 3 missed calls from an unknown number, 1 voicemail, another text from Judith. "Do not leave. He's moving fast." Marianne hit play. Judith's voice came through, low and urgent. "Marianne, I just spoke to the church administrator. Grant tried to get the footage blocked. He also filed an emergency petition an hour ago, before the service ended." Marianne's stomach turned to ice. Then a second message popped up. This one from Daniel Ashford. "I have your father's sealed letter. Meet me in the parish office. Alone." And as Marianne stood, the brass key in her fist, the hallway light flickered, because Grant was already coming for her next. The parish office smelled like printer toner and old paper, the kind of quiet that usually meant forms and blessings, not ambushes. Marianne closed the door behind her and immediately saw the folder on the desk, already labeled in black marker, Reed/Halloway, Emergency. Judith Pruitt stood near the window, phone pressed to her ear, jaw tight.
Daniel Ashford waited beside a small desktop monitor, his hands flat on the table like he was holding a storm in place. Marianne's brass key was warm from her grip, her father's note damp at the edges from her palm. "Tell me the truth," Marianne said. Her voice surprised her, steady, not pleading. Judith ended the call and faced her. "Grant filed an emergency petition before the service ended," she said. "He's asking for temporary guardianship and exclusive control of marital funds. He's claiming you're unstable and financially irresponsible. The missing envelope story was his setup." Marianne's stomach hollowed. "He can do that today?" "He can file today," Judith replied. "Getting it granted is different, but he's moving fast to box you in." Marianne's iPhone lit up with another notification. Not from the bank this time, an email from her building management. "Access suspended per resident request." She stared at the words until they blurred. Grant wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to erase her from her own life, one lock at a time. Then another buzz, assisted living, past due notice. A polite reminder that her mother's account needed immediate attention to avoid service interruption. Marianne's throat tightened so hard she couldn't swallow. Noah, her mother, a roof, her job. Grant had aimed at every support beam at once. Daniel pushed a box of tissues closer without a word, not as pity, just as practicality. Then he slid a sealed envelope across the desk, thick cream paper, Dr. Thomas Reed's handwriting on the front. "For Marianne, if Grant shames you in public—" Marianne's fingers hovered over it, afraid to touch it like it might burn. "I saw him," Daniel said quietly, "before the service. Grant handed Elaine that envelope, clear as day. And I asked the guard to preserve the footage before it overwrote." Judith opened her briefcase and placed copies of time-stamped screenshots beside the envelope like anchors. "This is the start of your proof," she said. "But your father left more than proof." Marianne finally picked up the sealed letter. The brass key in her other hand suddenly made sense, heavy with purpose. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your father also scheduled a trustees meeting tomorrow at the plaza, and Grant has no idea you're the one who holds the key." Judith didn't open Dr. Reed's sealed letter like it was gossip. She treated it like evidence. Clean hands, steady breath, no drama. She slid a slim paper cutter from her briefcase, sliced the top edge, and tipped the contents onto the desk. One page, then another, then a small folded document with a notary stamp. Marianne recognized her father's handwriting immediately. It wasn't sentimental. It was surgical. "Mari," the letter began, "if you are reading this, Grant finally did what I suspected he would do. Use your dignity as a step stool." Marianne's throat tightened, but Judith kept reading out loud, letting the words land in the room where Grant couldn't twist them. Dr. Reed confirmed 3 things in plain language. First, Grant had been warned in writing months ago about marital conduct and public humiliation. Second, Dr. Reed had formed the Reed Family Trust and named Marianne the sole trustee the moment Grant crossed that line. Third, there was a morality clause tied to the foundation funds Grant loved to brag about. If he committed adultery and then publicly shamed Marianne, any support, introductions, and credit backing linked to the Reed name would be withdrawn immediately. Daniel Ashford opened an iPad and pulled up a calendar invite. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "10 a.m., the plaza. Trustees, bank rep, foundation chair. Your father scheduled it weeks ago." Marianne's fingers curled around the brass key. "So this key," Judith tapped the notary-stamped page, "it opens your father's safe deposit box. Inside is the original trust binder, certified copies, and a second letter, addressed to the judge on any emergency petition Grant might file." She looked up.
"He planned for the exact tricks Grant is trying today." Marianne's mind raced. "But Grant already locked me out. The building, the accounts." Judith's mouth set. "Temporary. We can restore access once the trust documents are delivered to your building management and the bank. And the guardianship petition?" She flipped another page. "Grant claimed you're unstable. Your father anticipated that lie, too. He documented your caregiving, your work record,
"And named witnesses who will testify to your fitness as Noah's mother." Daniel's voice softened. "You're not alone in this." From the outer office, Noah's quiet laugh flickered. Daniel had handed him a bottle of water and a chair, keeping him safely out of the battlefield. Judith's phone buzzed. She read the screen, and her eyes went cold. "Grant just requested an emergency hearing for 8 a.m. before the plaza meeting, and he's sending someone to serve you tonight." Judith moved like she was building a case, not comforting a widow. She cleared a corner of the parish desk and turned it into a war table, time-stamped screenshots from the entrance camera, a printed guest log from the staffer's check-in system, and a clean sheet labeled "Timeline" in block letters. "Everything has to tell one story," she said, sliding her reading glasses on. "Who did what, when, where, why, and what happened next?" Daniel opened his MacBook Pro and pulled up the copied footage. He didn't just show the clip of Grant handing Elaine the envelope, he pulled the minutes before and after, so no one could claim it was misunderstood. The camera captured Grant arriving early, scanning the room, then passing the envelope like a baton. Elaine's hands closed around it. 10 minutes later, she accused Marianne.
Judith typed an affidavit for the security guard, and another for the funeral director, who finally admitted, quietly, that Grant had requested Marianne be escorted out if she spoke. Judith didn't ask them to take sides. She asked them to confirm facts: time, location, actions, and exact words. Marianne watched, feeling something change inside her. For weeks, she'd felt like she was drowning in Grant's version of reality. Now the truth was being pinned to paper, stapled, indexed. Impossible to gaslight. Judith placed the credit alerts beside the guarantor document Marianne found on the spare phone. "This shows intent," she said. "He didn't just cheat. He engineered dependency." Daniel stepped out, made 2 calls, and returned with a name and a scheduled time. "The bank's fraud liaison will join us by phone tomorrow," he said. "They'll confirm the inquiry and the signature mismatch process." In the outer room, Noah sat with headphones on, sipping water, eyes red but steady. Marianne didn't pull him into the details. She only asked softly, "If someone asks what you heard today, can you tell the truth in 1 sentence?" Noah nodded. "I can." Judith snapped the binder shut. "We're strong," she said, "but we still need one final piece." She held up the brass key and said, "Tonight, we open Dr. Reed's safe deposit box before Grant's process server reaches you." The bank lobby on Fifth Avenue was all marble and whispers, the kind of place where people never raised their voices because money listened. Marianne kept her coat buttoned to her throat, brass key hidden in her fist, while Judith walked beside her like an anchor, and Daniel stayed half a step behind, watching the doors. "Grant can't stop us from opening a safe deposit box you're authorized to access," Judith said, voice low, "but he can try to stall you long enough to win that emergency hearing." At the service desk, Judith presented her bar card and Dr. Reed's authorization letter. The manager's eyes flicked over the notarized seal, then to Marianne's face, red-rimmed, steady. No pity, just recognition that this was official. They were led down a narrow hallway into the vault, the air cooler, the lights brighter. Marianne's breath caught when the attendant stopped at a row of identical metal doors and slid out a long drawer. "Box 214, he said. Marianne's hands trembled as she inserted the brass key. It turned smoothly, like her father had oiled the future. Inside was a thick binder labeled Reed Family Trust, a sealed envelope addressed to Presiding Judge, Emergency Petitions, and a second flash drive taped to a card that read, "If Grant shames you, this is the proof." Judith opened the binder right there, flipping to the page marked Trigger Event. The language was plain, brutal, and undeniable. Any public humiliation of Marianne connected to an affair activated the morality clause. The clause didn't punish Grant with drama. It removed privileges with precision, foundation funding, introductions, credit assurances tied to the Reed name, automatically withdrawn once the trustee confirmed the trigger. Daniel plugged the flash drive into his iPad, scrolling through files, emails arranging funeral debut, a screenshot of Grant instructing Elaine to create a distraction, and a spreadsheet of donations with numbers that didn't match the church records. Not just adultery, fraud. Marianne's throat tightened. "He's been stealing?" Judith's voice went cold. "And using your name to cover it?" Then Judith opened the sealed judge envelope, only enough to confirm the heading. "Your father anticipated the unstable wife lie," she said. "He wrote to the court himself, with witnesses listed. Grant's emergency petition is about to collapse." Marianne clutched the binder to her chest. For the first time since the church doors opened, she didn't feel hunted. She felt armed. Outside the vault, Daniel's phone buzzed. He read the message, and his face hardened. "Grant just moved the hearing to 7 a.m., and his process server is on the way to your apartment right now." Daniel didn't drive Marianne back to her apartment. He didn't even ask. He simply guided her and Noah into the back seat of his black Mercedes, shut the door with quiet finality, and told the driver, "Park Avenue, no stops." The city slid past the tinted windows, storefront lights, wet sidewalks, people living ordinary nights, while Marianne sat with her father's trust binder on her lap like it was a beating heart. Noah looked at her, eyes wide. "Are we running?" Marianne reached for his hand. "No," she said. The word came out steadier than she felt. "We're choosing where we stand." Judith rode up front, already typing on her phone, her voice low and precise. "Grant's process server can't serve you if you're not there," she said. "And the judge letter will gut his emergency petition." "But we have to show up at 7 a.m., calm, factual, and prepared." Marianne swallowed. The old version of her, the one who kept peace at any cost, wanted to go home, unlock the door, pretend this was still a marriage that could be saved. Grant had trained that instinct into her. Apologize for his cruelty, smooth things over, make it easier for everyone else. But the church had changed something. So had the vault. "Let him say I'm unstable," Marianne said quietly. "I've watched patients survive worse than lies." They arrived at Daniel's building, discreet and quiet, a doorman who asked no questions beyond a respectful nod. Daniel led them to a spare suite upstairs that belonged to the parish fund for emergency housing. A folded blanket waited on the couch. A glass of water appeared in Noah's hands without anyone making it a big moment.
Judith laid the binder on the dining table like a judge's bench. "Tonight we file our response," she said.
"Tomorrow morning we bring the judge letter. And at 10, the plaza. Marianne, you walk in as trustee."
Marianne stared at the mirror in the hallway. Her face was pale, eyes swollen, but her spine was straight. She slid off her wedding ring and placed it in her clutch, not as a threat, not as a performance, just a boundary. "I'm not begging anymore," she said. "Not for money, not for decency, not for my own life." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "Good."
Because the only thing left for Grant to fear is truth.
Judith's phone buzzed again. She read the screen and looked up sharply. "He just filed a second motion, requesting police assistance to remove you from your home tonight." Judith didn't let the words police assistance scare her into panic. She let them sharpen her. In Daniel's quiet apartment,
She set her phone on speaker and started filing, one motion after another, like she was sealing doors before Grant could slam them in Marianne's face.
"He's trying to weaponize urgency," Judith said, fingers moving fast. "We answer with accuracy." Marianne sat at the dining table with the Reed family trust binder open, her father's letter beside it. Noah stayed on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, headphones on, protected from the legal language.
Every few minutes, Marianne looked up just to see his chest rise and fall.
Proof she still had one thing Grant couldn't rewrite: her child's trust. Daniel slid an iPad toward her. On the screen was a simple checklist Judith had built: footage timestamps, affidavits, credit alerts, trust trigger clause, judge letter. Not drama, order. The kind of order that survives a courtroom. "You don't need a long speech," Judith told Marianne. "You need 3 clean sentences: who, what, when, and.
And your documents do the rest."
Marianne nodded, throat tight. She wasn't shaking now. She felt hollow, like grief had burned through her and left space for something steadier. She pulled a plain black suit from the closet Daniel kept for community events, pressed the collar flat with her palms, and pinned her hair back the way she did before difficult family meetings at the hospital. At 6:45 a.m., Judith's phone rang. She listened, then exhaled once, controlled relief. "The judge accepted the letter," she said. "Grant's emergency petition is flagged. No removal order, no guardianship today." Marianne closed her eyes for 1 second. Not to cry. To remember her father's handwriting. The way he always signed his name with a firm, final stroke, like a promise. Daniel handed her a folder. "For the plaza," he said quietly. "Trust documents, certified copies, and the footage summary. Everything a room full of powerful people can't ignore." Noah stood,
Taller than he'd looked yesterday.
"Do I have to talk?" he asked. "Only if you want," Marianne said, touching his shoulder. "1 sentence, the truth. Then you sit back down." By 9:58 a.m., they were in the corridor outside the trustees' meeting room at the plaza. Marianne heard Grant's laugh through the door, confident, careless, certain the story was already his. She tightened her grip on the folder and nodded once at Judith. The door swung open,
And Grant's smile froze when he saw Marianne walk in, standing beside the attorney he couldn't silence.
The trustees' meeting room at the plaza smelled like coffee and expensive restraint. A long table, water glasses lined up like they'd been measured, and a screen on the wall already waiting for Grant's presentation. He stood at the head of it, suit flawless, Sloane seated to his right with her hand resting on her belly like a silent headline. 2 foundation trustees,
A bank representative on speakerphone, and 3 people Marianne recognized from her father's circles looked up as the door opened.
Grant's smile held for half a second, then snapped. "Marianne," he said too loud, "this is not the place." Judith Pruitt stepped in first, calm as a judge. "Actually, it is," she replied. "This meeting was scheduled by Dr. Thomas Reed, and Ms. Reed is here in her legal capacity." Grant recovered fast. "She's grieving," he told the room, lowering his voice into that fake compassion. "She's been confused. She caused a disturbance at the funeral." Judith slid a certified copy across the table. "Reed Family Trust, page 1. Marianne Reed is the sole trustee as of yesterday, triggered by the morality clause Dr. Reed filed months ago." Sloane's eyes narrowed. "That's not real," she said, but her voice wavered. Daniel Ashford connected an iPad to the screen. "This is," he said simply. The footage filled the wall. Grant arriving early at the church, scanning the room, then handing Elaine Fitch the exact envelope that later became the accusation against Marianne. The timestamp sat in the corner like a nail, 10:12 a.m., 10 minutes before the service. A trustee leaned forward. "Grant, is that you?" Grant laughed once, sharp. "Out of context," he said. "That woman asked me to hold it. This is ridiculous." Judith didn't flinch. "Affidavits are attached. Security guard. Funeral director." Both confirm Mr. Halloway requested Mrs. Reed be escorted out if she spoke. She turned slightly so the speakerphone could hear. "And the bank will confirm the fraud inquiry and guarantor document discovered on the device Mr. Halloway concealed." The bank representative's voice came through, flat and professional. "We can confirm an inquiry and a guarantor form associated with Ms. Reed's profile. We are placing an immediate hold pending investigation." Grant's face tightened. "You can't! You don't get to negotiate consequences," one trustee said quietly. Sloane stood up too fast. "Grant, you promised—" Grant cut her off with a look that said, "Shut up or fall with me." Then he turned to Marianne, voice low and venomous. "You think paper makes you powerful? I'll take Noah. I'll tell them you're unstable. Noah, seated near the door with Daniel, spoke once, small, steady. "Dad paid her before the funeral. I saw it." The room went still. Grant's mask cracked. Grant suddenly lunged toward the table, reaching for the trust binder like he meant to rip it in half. Grant's hand never reached the binder. 2 hotel security guards were already at the door. The plaza didn't tolerate outbursts in a trustees' meeting. One stepped in, firm but calm, and held Grant back as if this was routine. Grant jerked once, then froze when he realized everyone was watching him without sympathy. The foundation chair pushed his chair back slowly. "This meeting is adjourned," she said, eyes hard. "And Mr. Halloway is no longer welcome in any Reed-affiliated program." Judith didn't celebrate. She simply slid a final packet across the table, copies for each trustee, clean labels, clear timelines. "You have evidence of staged accusations, attempted guardianship manipulation, and possible fraud," she said. "The appropriate agencies will handle the rest." On speakerphone, the bank representative stayed professional. "Accounts connected to the flagged activity remain frozen pending investigation. We will cooperate with counsel." Sloane stood there, pale, one hand on her belly, the other gripping her purse strap like a lifeline. Her eyes moved between Grant and the screen where his own actions had been time-stamped. She didn't cry. She looked stunned, like someone who'd bet on the wrong horse and just realized the horse was poisoned. Grant tried one last time to perform. "Marianne." "This is unnecessary," he said, voice tight. "We can talk privately." Marianne didn't raise her voice.
She didn't need to. "You made it public," she said. "You chose my father's funeral. This is simply the truth returning to its owner." Noah stayed behind Daniel's shoulder, safe and quiet, his role already finished. Daniel's hand rested lightly on the boy's upper back, steady, protective, no speeches. 2 weeks later, the emergency petition was dismissed. The court noted Dr. Reed's letter,
Judith's filings, and the documented attempts to isolate Marianne. Grant's concern became a pattern of control. The divorce moved fast after that, assets traced, accounts restored, and the guarantor document flagged as fraudulent. Grant lost his position and, with it, the only thing he worshipped more than himself, his reputation. Marianne moved into a smaller place near Central Park, not flashy, warm. Her mother's care stayed funded through the trust her father built with love and foresight, not drama. Noah went back to being 16. School, friends, ordinary laughter. On a quiet Sunday, Daniel walked with Marianne past the bare trees, a simple ring in his pocket and respect in his eyes. "I'm not here to rescue you," he said. "I'm here because I admire the woman who stood up." Marianne smiled, finally breathing without fear. "Then walk with me," she said. And he did. So that's the story, my wonderful friends. And if you're still here with me right now, it means something, and this journey touched your heart in a real way. Maybe it wasn't even about cheating. It was about what happens when someone tries to erase you, and you finally choose to stand up without becoming cruel. And that's the lesson we can actually take into real life. You don't heal by screaming louder than the liar. You heal by building your ground. Marianne didn't win because she had a perfect life. She won because she stopped begging for fairness and started protecting what mattered with calm truth, witnesses, and boundaries. As the Stoics would say, you have power over your mind, not outside events. When you can't control what someone does to you, you can still control your next right move. And another reminder that fits this ending, the obstacle is the way. The pain wasn't the end of her. It became the path to clarity, dignity, and a safer home for her child. If this message helped you breathe a little deeper today, please hit like, share this with someone who needs strength, and subscribe to the channel because you're not alone, and more healing stories are coming.